Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to the Spiritually Engineered Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human experience from a spiritual perspective. Come on in, and I invite you to stay. You know, living life here on this planet is nothing short of an amazing opportunity. I say that from having that big picture perspective and keeping that in the back of my mind through the ebbs and flows and all the things that I've experienced. And one of the things that will always be a reality, something to come to terms with, is navigating through a busy world that influences the when we navigate our inner world, a lot of things that are coming up, from day-to-day responsibilities to aspirations to relationships, a lot of things. Busy, 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 busy. Right? It's just so much energy, so much of that energy is out there. And it's a reality that's a part of all of this when it comes to living life. And I start with this first because it's definitely important to recognize just calling life as it is. That's just how it is currently. Not necessarily how it should be or supposed to be. That's a different thing altogether. But just recognizing the reality of where things are, I think is very important to build that acceptance, which I believe is a crucial key for cultivating peace and, in some sense, harmony. That word just kind of popped into my mind. And I know for me, ever since I've traveled to back in early July to summer camp for spiritual renewal, fellowship, and a lot of good things, then it's like coming back and integrating, trying to reintegrate new things, making significant progress in a couple areas that I can identify for myself that has a lot to do with how I feel about myself in particular moments, how I feel in those moments, feeling tuned into myself and tuning out all that outer noise that's just out there. And so this episode, I just wanted to just talk about this whole busy aspect and really where I'm at in this journey. And yeah, I feel like I have a lot of good projects. I have a lot of things going. Or at least, let me actually change that. I have a lot of things I'm thinking about, a lot of things on my mind. And from that to technology, from like the TV, my laptop, the phone, all these things make it really hard to focus my energy where it needs to go. And I was watching this one YouTube video after kind of binging watching entertainment videos and things like that. I was like, all right, if I'm here on YouTube, since I know that's one of my habits of just binge watching YouTube, let me watch this one particular informative, personal growth oriented video that talked about goals and setting one goal. And in this YouTube video, this creator, was talking about giving his tips on how to be more productive by having just one goal. And he phrased it in a way where it's one of the things that I was just like thinking about, that I'm in the process of still answering and journaling, has to do with, and I'll ask you this, currently at this time in your life, what are your top priorities? Maybe you can think of 10 of them, but try to see if you can distilling it down to what are your top five. And then looking at those five top priorities that you have currently at this time in your life, really looking at each and every single one of them, which of them do you feel perhaps like an intuitive nudge or some resonance or is capturing your attention? And and I think it's important to, at least for me, when I was asking myself the question and I was beginning to answer that, it just makes me realize, how easy it is to get so caught up in the busyness, the busy distractions. Especially, one of the things that this content creator was talking about in the videos is like having these ideas. There's like, he was talking about how there's no issues of ideas, is more about follow through, execution. And an issue that can happen for that he shared himself that he's dealt with was just like creating a list and just adding on to the list and then feeling bad because like, oh, there's so much on this list I haven't even followed through or done with in terms of like the ideas. And so that's one of the things that I find myself. I try to create like my own little funnel system. I even have like a voice recorder that I use to track when I have a thought or an inspiration or perhaps a reminder for myself. That has been actually pretty helpful. Like I'm glad I'm kind of getting back into it, and I try to keep my voice recorder with me, and I try to have a separate device for that instead of using my phone, so that I'm not wanting to like associate like, oh, this dependency, keep my phone on me, because like, okay, yeah, the phone is useful, it's important, but I don't want to create this kind of like make my phone like a life support. So like I wanted to use a different device specifically for this purpose, for just jotting down my thoughts, which for me, recording, speaking is like the easiest way for me rather than just like writing down on a small notebook, although I've tried that before. But I've just been having this funnel system that of just, okay, I'm creating a list and it feels like it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, ideas, tasks, and things like that. And when I had seen this particular YouTube video, it just brought to my attention and just really dawned on me like, if I if I make sure, let's say going back to the five top priorities, and I focus on that one that resonates, it's important that I make sure that whatever actions I'm doing day in and day out, I'm referring back to that priority that I set for myself. Is what I'm doing now building me towards this one priority, this one goal? And then being sincere enough with myself where if it's not, okay, how can I adjust? Okay, I seem to be doing this because I've always been very guilty when I've been at work, when I've been, particularly at work or even in my personal life, when it comes to balancing tasks, projects, and stuff, it's very easy for me to want to focus on a particular task that, you know, it's not necessarily like insignificant, but it's not the top priority on the list. It's like one of those things that perhaps I could do during my downtime, but I start to prioritize that and I start using that as a way to kind of escape what I know I need to do. And so there's like this avoidance of something that I know I need to do, especially like if there's a timestamp behind it, if if there's a deadline, if I have to do it by a certain point. And I find that very fascinating because it's like why am I having avoidance or fear of addressing something that I know needs to get done? But see, oftentimes our needs can guide us towards something that's uncomfortable, which can only speak to whatever it is that there's full of growth behind it. Because you can't grow in your comfort zone. Growth happens outside of the comfort zone. And it definitely explains a lot of why some things have been really difficult and it feels hard, and things that I'd much rather avoid. Like, for example, trying to be more consistent with posting more content on YouTube. I have this podcast, and I've been moving to YouTube and doing videos to just share spiritually more with people. Although I kind of approach things a little bit more differently with the podcast, because here in this podcast it's more about like the chronicles, kind of sharing day to day life, but through my lens, my experience is what, in essence, what I've been going through, and sharing with you what I'm extracting from that experience. What's the meaning behind that experience? What's the big picture in that? The spiritual part, the spiritual aspect. And so that's like the YouTube thing. I know for me is something that I recognize within myself is important for sharing spiritually, because it's like approaching how what I share spiritually from a different perspective, from a different angle, really, a different angle, and how I communicate, what I communicate, and things like that. This is more kind of casual, lean back. That YouTube, I want it to be more formal, educational, informative, and also kind of fun too. There's some sprinkle of entertainment purposes, but I do that by bringing in my personality into it, which again I'm working on, just to shake off the camera shyness that can sometimes still kind of creep up on me. But anyway, not to get too far into that. But that's just one example there for myself where I sense this need. Do you have within yourself this need to do something? And maybe perhaps you might this you're aware of something that you've been procrastinating, and deep down discern for a moment if it's because of a need, because it's like there's something there for you. Like if you feel like you've been avoiding something because the thought of it makes you feel uncomfortable, to me there's a good chance that there's something there for you spiritually that's filled with tremendous growth. And it's one of those things that, for myself, what I'm learning and practicing in the game of life is just being sincere with myself to stick to it with my priorities. But in this case, focusing on, at least what I've been putting together from the recent YouTube video I watched, to focus on one priority, one goal at a time. And I had this thought and intention, okay, for August, let me just set one specific goal, one priority from a big picture perspective. And that's not meant to like be very specific, like pick up the trash, but kind of more so overarching, right? You know, so I say that to share with you, like, I think it would be a good practice to try out to, if you never worked with goals before, or maybe you've had issues or blocks with it, to just start with just one, because I know I can overwhelm myself and I start getting into where the critical part comes in me when I'm like evaluating. I'm like, I look at about like the cup being half empty rather than how looking at the cup as half full. Like, okay, what's the progress I've actually made? But even more so, it's like, what's the one priority I want to focus on so I feel like I'm actually making progress, where I'm doing more in less time. And that's because I'm hitting those targets that really hit the spot. And by that, I mean like the spiritual fulfillment, like, it's like, okay, that fulfillment, that nourishment. Can you identify a time in your life when you've done something, and it might not even be significant on the surface, or you're looking at it, looking back, or looking at it outside in, but maybe perhaps to you it felt really significant. And that's all the difference, and really all that matters at the end of the day. No matter what it is, it's what it does for you, right? How does that make you feel? And it's been a journey for me to just how I navigate working with goals and stuff like that. Because, like I said, I'm very goal oriented, but I've always been really setting the bar too high for myself and setting myself up for just that self critical part, that critic within myself, which is something that I'm learning to embrace, not identify with, not to allow to rule me, but to embrace it, not fight it. And embracing it for the purpose of, what is this trying to tell me? What are these experiences where I'm caught by my inner critic, or what is that showing me? What is being communicated to me? Is how I look at it from that perspective. And one something I've been doing was I've been utilizing this app to map out those priorities. That has been like my equivalent of journaling. I've just literally just been typing in and kind of playing around with this application that works pretty well, that I enjoy, to just map out like what are my priorities. Because it's like something for some reason it just, when I asked myself that, it was just like, yeah, what are my priorities? Like I had to, it's one of those moments that warranted rechecking myself. I need to kind of take stock, right? Take a moment, pause, take a break. Here's my pit stop. Driving the car. Like think of like the NASCAR when the drivers are going around and then they have to stop at a certain point at the pit stop to get, for to address any mechanical issues and maintenance, and the driver continues going. Vroom. It's like we all need to stop. We need to like make our pit stop in our own race. Although I'm using the term race loosely here because it's not about who's forward or behind. Just want to make that perfectly clear here. But I'm just using that analogy because of the pit stop. And just being in that pit stop for myself to just check on, okay, what are my priorities? Because by doing that, asking yourself, what are your priorities right now? What are the things that are important to you right now at this time? That's adjusting my compass, my direction. And I believe everybody needs to do this on some recurring basis. And that's why, when I do it for the month, it serves as a good space in between as we move through cycles, as we move through time. It's a good space in between so I'm not like, overwhelmed or making it too stressful, right? I think it's important that whatever, when it comes to the spiritual practices and the inner work, not to make it too much of a crazy process or thing, you know? If journaling becomes stressful, then something needs to be adjusted in terms of the practice itself, the practice. But in any case, here, but just thinking about and mapping out for myself what are my priorities and just really being really sincere with myself about it. And so it's been an interesting process for myself that I started doing. And now for me, as I mentioned, I'm going to set one goal, one priority for this upcoming month. Where is it that I need to focus my attention on? And then if I complete that goal for that month, then I'll readjust, come back to my pit stop and reassess from there. You know, it's like worry about that bridge because I remember I would tell myself like, oh, if I set one goal, what if I complete it in time or something? Something to that effect, right? It's like this conversation in my head. What I tell myself, oh, what if I complete it and it's done and it's the month's not over? Okay, well, we'll worry about that when we get there, when we cross that bridge, and then at that point, again, reassess. And the beautiful thing about the pit stop is like it can happen at any point in time, and to stop there to be there for for yourself as needed, whenever needed, without feeling obligated. Oh, I gotta do this, which is again, this is an influence for myself. It's like, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. These shoulds and supposed to that I can feel in my subconscious and my programming growing up. It's just whoa, like chill. Ain't gotta be too heavy, all that crazy. Ain't gotta be too deep and too, because then at a certain point things get really intellectual. Like if you find yourself in a moment, where if it's just like you're thinking too much into your head, it's like it's time to move out, step out of it. And it's funny because an interesting experience I had where I kind of stepped out of my head and just more into my body, into the present moment. I was twirling my rope that I used for my rope flow practice uh, yesterday, and I was just in the hallway and I was just improvising. Because one of the things I do, I'll kind of set it up so that I'll have like an app or shortcut kind of generate random patterns that I do. And but this time around, I decided to just improv it. Like screw it, forget the shortcut, the automation. Let me just freestyle this. And then I just started navigating and just working through thoughts that were coming up, and but just moving through it. That was the important thing. And it was just one of those moments that I really felt really cleared and really uplifted after having done it. And so I think that's something very important to have in the pit stop is just having that moment to just connect with the present moment. Because again, like the busy, 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 like it's out there. That's not going to change, my friend. And I'm just looking at this from the bigger picture. It's not going to change. Better to understand that, accept that, and know, okay, how can I move through this? And learning the art of navigating through the busyness and more so of like actually being spiritually productive. And having that a movement practice, for me at least, it helps. Maybe drawing or singing, something physical that requires your almost intention and you have to be engaged in. When you're taking those little pauses in life for yourself to check back in with yourself, because that's very, very important. Because otherwise, again, I'm gonna stress it again because it's a thing, and it's always a reminder for myself, and I'm just repeating it for myself too. It's like it's very easy to get caught up in the busyness, to involve myself in the busyness, that I can ultimately just blow off my timing. I can blow off so many things, gets distracted, detour, when I could have just been way better off if I would have just stuck with my task, stick with the priority. And so that's something that I want to emphasize is the importance of just sticking with the priority. Identify for yourself, again, like 10 or ideally 5, and then of the 5, what's the one priority that would make a difference? Even just playing around with the thought, like, what would it feel like when you tackle that one priority that you identify? How would that feel? And play around with that. And if anything, it gets stimulated in a good way. You feel a shift. You feel lighter, even by just a little bit. That's a good indicator. That's like, okay, let me focus on that. Just listening to your intuitive sense. Where do you feel that resonance? Where do you feel something, right? And I say feeling, not emotions, but like your true feelings, which I can make it. I can simplify as like, for example, how do you know when to use the bathroom? Whether it's number one, number two, you feel it, right? The feeling that's very concrete, like that. So, and when it comes to busy and all this stuff and the planet, like there's so much to experience here. But here's the thing, here's the reality. You didn't come here to experience everything. And in my opinion, I don't want to experience everything here on this planet. I don't. I just want to experience what I need. And I would hope for you, my friend, to experience what you need. In order to do that, is working in balance and harmony with your intellect, your thinking mind, and then your feeling part, your heart, your intuitive part, and just working with that, making that a daily practice. That's working my intuition, working with my psychic abilities. We have the different names, but really just working with our own energy here. And so follow your heart so that you move towards what you actually need, and you even shift more into this joy of missing out as well too, because the fear of missing out, or FOMO as it's called, can also be very disruptive and distracting. Distraction, distraction, distraction. And the thing is, we're here on this planet to work on ourselves and also being of service to people. At some point, we can have distractions. You can get distracted. You can play, whether it be movies, TV shows, video games, or whatever. But at some point down the line, you have to face yourself. You have to face yourself. You can't run away. You always keep coming back. And there's always going to be something in life that happens to make that'll, in some, I don't want to, I mean, in some sense, I'll use it loosely here, kind of force. But that really is more indicative of the support system that we really have here in this planet, and just being here in this world, living in two worlds at once, the material and the spiritual. It's really more to just highlight that. So I use that term force loosely. But it's like things will manifest itself where that it allows people to just hold up, shift. It could be something physical. It could be something spiritual. So that's touching on the big picture of why it's important not to get caught up in the busyness and be more responsible with your own energy, navigating that, and being busy. Actually, be busy doing the things that you need to do. Being involved in things you know deep down you need to, and you know that more than anybody else. I'm not here to tell you that. Definitely your loved ones, or if you have a partner, or friends and family, colleagues, or whoever, it's not their job to tell you what you need to do. That's your job, my friend. And you know. And you know. And so when trying to figure this all out and navigating, just do it one step at a time. one goal, one focus, one priority at a time. There's a good chance if you haven't thought about it or you're not sure if you have so much on your mind, if you give yourself the space without any TV, no distractions or anything, just you with yourself with whatever media you use to record your thoughts, whether it's a recorder, a piece of paper, journal, whatever the case may be, to help you process and kind of mind dump what's been on your mind, and just work in small steps, one step at a time, and then whatever it is you identify, write on a sticky note, put it somewhere where you're reminded every single day. This is my priority right now. This is what I'm focusing on. And if it shifts, it shifts. Write a new sticky note. But then the important thing is just to stick with it, to stick with that note, that priority. And and in doing so, you're shifting from busyness to business, the business of you spiritually, focusing on moving towards your path, living your purpose, working with spirit in that service, and being on this path where there's nothing but win-win for everybody involved. So just sharing this for myself, because especially just reminding myself, but then I want to share with you, my friend, really how important this is, because busy is never going to stop. And the only person that can make it stop for yourself is you. And when I mean busyness is not going to stop, I'm meaning like out there in the world, in the hustle and bustle out there in the planet. That's going to keep going. But I'm practicing this sincerity with myself to just cut it there with myself. Like, no, I'm not going to let the busyness of others and stuff stop me from where I need to move towards. Not today. I'm going where I need to go, not get caught up in the outer noise. And so I just wanted to, I'll leave it there for this particular episode. I mean, I'm pretty sure, a lot could be said, but I think this is what's been coming up for me so far, something that I've been working on, and yeah, I hope, this resonates, because I think it's very important that we do that so that we stop wasting our time, which is the most precious thing that we can never get back. Our time that will not get refunded. All this to say is, this whole episode is just to honor our time, because it's finite. We have all the time in the universe as a soul, but as far as this physical vehicle that you're using to listen to me talk, that vehicle, it has an expiration date. Or rather than say an expiration date, that's not true. It has an exit ticket. Just like how I know my physical body I have my exit ticket where sever the silver cord and I go back home. We all go back home at some point out there in the universe. So that's more of a better phrasing. I don't want to say expiration, but because it's like we all have control. We all can have a good sense of having some control of our future by setting direction, being clear with it, like where is it that I want to move towards? Because there's that saying, there's protection in direction. So I want to impart that particular bit as well, because I think it's important that people hear this and recognize this. There's a lot of truth behind that, and it's what's helped me out a lot, for sure. And so if you made it to this point of the episode, thank you so much, my friend. I hope I gave you something to think about, and I invite you to, if you haven't, to take a moment to go to your pit stop, your sanctuary, to evaluate yourself and, work small from there to kind of check, okay, where is it that you're what's going on in your life, and where do you want to go? It's like evaluating, it's like, where have I been, where am I, and where am I going? And getting a good sense of that is of the utmost priority. I'm taking more into consideration for myself and practicing. So, this has been another episode of Spiritual Engineered. I'm your host, Alvin Spetta, signing out. And as always, take care, my dear friend.